Hello, Tuesday. So, calculated risk, where I got that chart of consumer sentiment in the United States and how it went horribly down. The chappie there has wondered about that horribly down and wondered if it had happened before and found occasions where it had and asked himself, well, what happened next? And has given us this little chart thing to say what happened next. These are event-driven declines in consumer sentiment, and the event, 1987, was the market crash, where there was no impact at all on personal consumption, and sentiment had bounced back within 2 months. The Gulf War, sentiment took 6 months to bounce back, and consumption did decline. 9/11, 4 months it took for sentiment to bounce back, and consumption declined 3 out of the next 4 months. Iraq invasion had no impact on consumption, and sentiment was back within 2 months. Hurricane Katrina declined in consumption for 2 months, and sentiment was back within 3. So the question is now, what he's calling the debt ceiling cause for consumer sentiment to be falling off a cliff, will it also cause consumers to stop spending? If so, for how long? And how long will it be before they get all that sentiment back to normal, nice, cuddly levels? Open question. Reggie Middleton, we go on. Number 2. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. Reggie Middleton, and he has got his favourite thing, which is the economic circle of life. Economic circle of life. Mother Nature doing its rounds of boom and bust. I'm going to zoom in down here to the red part, which is an addition to it, where he tells of what's going on in the world today. Central bankers, yes, worldwide have interrupted the cycle here. Arrows, under the apparently mistaken impression they can override the business cycle and skip past the contraction phase. This is most apparent in equity markets, where excess liquidity have pushed all equities straight up, as well as bond markets where yields have been suppressed to artificial ZERP levels. The truth cannot be concealed in real asset markets, where properties are still dropping. It was the real asset market that kicked off the bust to begin with, and it will probably be the real asset markets that bring us back to reality. And the extended contraction that has been exacerbated by the folly of the central economic planning experiments that central bankers attempted on a global basis and in concert to defeat the laws of the economic mother nature. Reggie says the suits are trying everything they can to stop going into the contraction phase, but economic mother nature will have her way. Out there in the press, this is just one example I got, but you can find it all over the place, of people wanting to tell Obama what to do. So we get Harold Meyerson saying, herewith a few tips for our beleaguered president. Good that you are taking a bus trip through the Midwest, but you should probably can your usual August escape to Martha's Vineyard if the economy continues to crumble. I know you need a break, but you're headed towards a long break starting Jan 20th, 2013, unless you change course. Mr. President, it's time to go big on the economic solutions. It's time to propose a massive second stimulus, offset by some serious tax hikes and budget cuts once the economy regains semblance of good health. It always go that way, isn't it? Big stimulus now, big stimulus, and serious tax hikes when everything gets better. Yeah. This is credit write-downs. Talking of MMT, And Edward Harrison, who is Credit Write-Downs, says even a non-MMT fiat currency skeptic like me, that's Edward, have figured it out. Personally, I see something cynical about these repeated bogus claims. Edward's talking about Dr. Krugman. For example, in March, Dr. Krugman wrote, "As I understand the MMT position, it is that the only thing we need to consider is whether the deficit creates excess demand to such an extent to be inflationary." Clearly he understands the MMT position, yet last week he wrote, MMT, modern monetary theory, types insist that deficits are never a problem as long as you have your own currency. See the difference? I did, Edward. Statement 1 is correct and statement 2 is incorrect, since Krugman made statement 1 prior to making statement 2. I am left guessing why he has returned to the mischaracterization which is the subject of his post. So many people seem to do this. Get MMT and then mentally reject it. Krugman is another one. Later, Edward goes on with P.S. In the end, this is a bit wonkish. If you want to go, well, I read this, there's no way of getting this across. It's not that wonkish. So pay attention. In the end, this is about interest rates. Why is Paul Krugman worrying about the US losing access to the bond market when the term structure of the yield curve largely reflects expected future policy rates? We just saw this is true after the Fed moved to permanent zero at the last FOMC meeting. The 0.375% US Treasury note maturing on the 31st of July 2013, in other words it was sold in the past but it's still tradable, is now yielding 19 basis points, a lot less. The Fed can do as much financial repression as they want by keeping rates below the headline inflation rate, since it has a monopoly power in the market for base money. Inflation and currency depreciation are the issues, not a steeper yield curve. PPS. The real issues are currency sovereignty, fiscal space and malinvestment. What we should really be worried about is stopping people worried about the US becoming the next Greece, turning the US into the next Japan. And if you want the link to Krugman's post, you follow this link and then that link and you can get to Krugman. But I think I'll repeat that last bit. What we really should be worried about is stopping people worried about the US becoming the next Greece, turning the US into the next Japan. You dig? You dig. New York Times, I think this is. But Christina Roma, we know her, who stepped down last year as the chairwoman of the President's Council of Economic Advisers, said Mr. Obama should fight for short-term spending in combination with long-term deficit reduction. It's a bit the same, isn't it? Again, short-term spending, but long, out there sort of long-term deficit reduction. Playing it safe is not going to cut it, said Ms. Roma, a professor of economics at the University of California, Berkeley. By proposing anything bold, not proposing anything bold and not trying to do something to definitively deal with our problems would mean that we are going to have another year and a half like the last year and a half, and then it's awfully hard to get re-elected. But there is little support for such an approach inside the administration. A series of departures has left few economists among Mr. Obama's senior advisers. Several of his political advisers are skeptical about the merits of stimulus spending, and they are certain about the politics. Voters don't like it. Interesting idea to throw the economists out and get political experts in. Last article, testosterone pit, and about Germany and German tax rates. So we're over in Europe, but we can imagine that Germany, who's meant to drive this European thing and link it to America, putting up taxes, what can you suck out of a population and keep things going? Give everyone an idea of at least what testosterone pit says is the situation as it pertains in Germany at the moment. The maximum personal income tax rate of 45% kicks in at about €250,000. That's $375,000. So that's high for a 45% top rate kick-in. Okay. But the next step down, 42%, kicks in at €54,000. That's $73,000. Now, that is not a big number. It is not just the rich that are getting whacked, because $73,000 is quite easy to earn, isn't it? Anyway, on top of that, they have the infamous thing called SOLI, of 55.5% of income tax due, introduced in 1991 to fund the rebuilding of East Germany after reunification. It was supposed to be temporary, but it is alive and kicking today, 20 years later, though it has no longer anything to do with East Germany. So you can slam 5.5% on top of everybody's income tax for SOLI. You also must have health insurance. Public in the lower income brackets, private very expensive in the higher brackets, based on the solidarity principle. People with high incomes pay more, often a lot more than people with low incomes, which leads to the absurd situation that my health insurance in the US, expensive as it seems outright reasonable compared to what I'd pay in Germany. But now, if I was poor, it would be the opposite, or rather, over there I'd have pretty decent health care, and here I'd have nothing. That's in the United States. And you pay your retirement contributions, which vary. If you're employed, they're mandatory. So there's health insurance and then retirement contributions on top. And no, you're not done paying yet. If you belong to a religious organisation, Catholic Church, Protestant Church, and others, you'll be whacked with the church tax, an additional 8 or 9% depending on the state. It is deducted from your pay and goes to the Ministry of Finance, which distributes it. Rather than a tax-deductible contribution, it's an outright tax. That's why so many fence-sitters have left the church. Yes, leaving the church is an official procedure. You can't just stop going and assume it'll allow you to escape church taxes. Now, I only worked in Germany for a couple of weeks, but I got the impression that it's quite voluntary, this church tax. But if you are that way inclined, and many are, that's another 8 or 9%. So your salaried employee, single with no kids, belonging to a religious organisation, and make, if you're lucky, 100k a year, that's euros, every time you look at your paycheck you just want to sit down and cry, because quick add up, that's at least 60% that's taken out of your pay packet, isn't it? And then that's you need health insurance and retirement contributions after that. Heck. And then, when you want to spend what little is left of your income, you have to face the scourge of all shoppers, a 19% value-added tax, VAT. VAT rhymes with splat. Shoppers in New York and San Francisco rejoice. You've got a bargain. Should I say anything? A lot of people are predicting that VAT will come to the United States. I don't think they'll be able to do it without adjusting the actual normal income tax system. What a sensible suggestion I heard was to alter the personal tax system by throwing it away entirely, and the corporation tax away entirely, and the social tax. Throw it all away entirely and base everything on VAT. It would be so much cheaper to get in, and you can talk about progressive and things like that. But somewhere along the lines, from what I'm gathering, the tax system in the United States and other places around the world do need simplifying an awful lot. And VAT might be part of the answer. Might it? Might it not? Comments? See ya. Bye.